Hey everybody, John Ray here with Musing Wizard, and I want to talk about self-reliance versus God-reliance. When we're trying to get something done, it is very difficult in a hustle harder world to think about how our spiritual team can deliver all things for us. Almost always, we're looking at what action can I take? What do I need to do? What's the choice that I need to make? And of course, you can rise to great success by being self-reliant and being a competent person and developing the skill set to really take an idea to fruition. But today I want to juxtaposition self-reliance with God-reliance, because there is a reason that the Bible tells us the meek inherit the earth, and the meek are those who are not reliant on themselves. They recognize that God is going to give them what they need, and they recognize that time can be collapsed, that synchronicities can happen, and that right people, right place, right time can be the de facto way that we interact with God. So today I'll be talking with Carl Brockman on the other line here about the difference between self-reliance and God-reliance. Is there an interplay between those two things? And can we overclock ourselves a little bit more in God-reliance and give ourselves a more enjoyable experience? So Carl, how we doing? What's happening with you?
Oh, I am well. It's Saturday morning here in sunny Sunshine Coast, and it's actually sunny after some non-sunny periods. Pumped to be here. Yeah, last time we spoke about money and money as a concept, and still I believe we really scratched the surface. I think it's one that we're going to have to revisit. But towards the end of that chat, you kind of spoke about that juxtaposition between God-reliance and self-reliance, and I was hoping to dig a little bit deeper here. And one thing that you said, and I guess this is the assumption that must be built, from my perspective anyway, underneath God-reliance. If we were to truly move away from relying on self, and we can talk about why that's a really important game for us to play, and I think it gets us from 0 to 1, and it sort of carves our path. But then at the end of self-reliance, what are you left with? Like the continual pull of power. Anyway, we can get down that path in a second. But you mentioned that abundance is our birthright. And I think this is an assumption or a knowing that one needs to have to really rely on God or the universe outside of themselves. And I wanted to, I guess, dig a little bit deeper there, John, from your understanding. It's cool to think that abundance is our birthright, but obviously so many of us live in scarcity. We don't see abundance. We're limited by our own beliefs or what we perceive the world to be. And I just imagine that that's a really hard concept for one to grasp. You know, if you said to me 6 years ago that abundance was my birthright, I would probably say, oh yeah, that must be nice. Yeah, okay, cool. Why don't I have it then? So yeah, tell me a bit more about your perspective there, John, and that statement, that principle.
Yeah, well, I think for one of the things that's attractive about religion or spirituality is that there is kind of a narrative arc between all of those things, that there is a kind of balance point or abundance or prosperity or ease in living that comes through some kind of spiritual alignment with what I'm calling God right now, but other people might call something else a supernatural force, a principled ideal, an optimal way of living. By being identified with something like that, we are putting ourselves on a trajectory to achieve it, because we are goal-oriented mechanisms, and just like getting in an airplane and setting the autopilot on a destination, the plane is constantly going to be making micro adjustments towards that destination, but setting the destination was the most important part for the autopilot to be able to play. And in many ways, God-reliance is trusting the autopilot more than us manually controlling the plane. So of course, both are possible, but we can have an easier go of things and play bigger games more optimally when we rely on a higher ideal principle, when we recognize that something bigger than ourselves is available to us in each moment. And this is how we continue to be growth-seeking individuals, by constantly expecting that there is a place that we can expand into from where we're at. And so whether you're an atheist or a Christian or a Buddhist, if you believe that you can grow from the position that you're in, you're believing in some kind of prosperity, because you're believing in an expanding principle that you can become more tomorrow than you are today. And just having that knowing that you can be a growth seeking individual and actually achieve that is in many ways the first step into a kind of God reliance, because it's relying on the idea that growth is possible. If you don't believe growth is possible, you can't even take that step. And so, if you wanted to start to test this and move from self reliance into God reliance, the first step of it would be that I believe that growth is possible for me. And you would work from that premise to kind of align your thinking and your decision space so that you choose things that are in the direction of that growth mindset. And so God in many ways is the most optimal thing for your life and for reality and for the way that you perceive reality that could be possible. And even though you may not have the wherewithal to dial in all of the specifics of that right now, we can still believe that an ideal is possible, and we can orient ourselves towards that ideal and then receive the intuitive impulses that move us directionally towards that. So I'll kind of pause there, but I think that's the initial stair step into some kind of God reliance, is recognizing that you're capable of growth.
Interesting. And again, for one to sit back and to take stock of their life, there are two ways that we can perceive it: is that, well, things are fixed and they will never change. And ultimately, if we believe that, then of course they are. Of course they won't change. We're at the whim of the externalities around us influencing our own orientation with life. Or the alternative is that we can grow. We can be. I love. There's a company that was founded very close to my home, LSKD. It used to be called Loose Kid Industries. Jason used to sell shirts at the skate park down in Morrowfield, and now has this amazing brand. I'm pretty sure they've got some flagship stores in the States now, which is incredible. Just a great journey to watch from the outside looking in. And their tagline is 1% better every day. And I really, really love that tagline, the continuous improvement methodology, and just that perception around, well, we can be a little bit better. And, what is putting $5 in the bank every day going to do over a long period of time? Well, it's going to exponentially grow. And it makes sense that as we orient ourselves with the understanding or the knowing that, yeah, we can grow, we can get a little bit better tomorrow than we are today, then of course it's going to lead us to a better relationship with God, the universe, the entropy reduction system for those who love playing that game. But yeah, just back to, so I guess as you develop that 1% better every day, as you develop the orientation with growth, is that how you develop the knowing that abundance is our birthright? Because we do grow, and we grow exponentially, and we remove scarcity, perspectives of lack, all of these things as we walk that path. Is that kind of how you come to an understanding that abundance is our birthright, or is there something else there?
I think it's just a hypothesis that you hang for yourself, and
Okay.
and you play it out as maybe, and you start to live as maybe this is possible. You give it a 50% shot, and you ask. The best thing that you can do to form a relationship with something higher than yourself is ask for the relationship. So, if you want a relationship with God, ask God to put something on your heart and to show you what that looks like. And in many ways, 1% better each day is still tabled in self-reliance. It's taking actions in order to get that growth, where what God puts on your heart, or that higher ideal puts on your heart, is exponential change. You had the word right in exponential, because it's not necessarily just 1% a day. It's sweeping movement. Sometimes it's miracles. We read it as the word miracle because it seems so anomalous and out of the ordinary. And you can become so centered in the fact that reality will order itself around your integrity and your relationship with God, your belief in God, that you do end up collapsing time, that you do end up in right place, right time, right people, at every point in your life. And then the beauty of it is that because reality is a feedback mechanism, and because whatever you're emoting is going to render itself to show you something about yourself on the movie screen, when you're self-reliant and you make a mistake, it's really hard to not beat yourself up because you recognize that you're the one that's responsible for your growth. But when you're God reliant and something seemingly goes wrong as a mistake, you can go in God with solace and say, I know you have a plan for my life, and I know you must be showing me something in this moment. Bring me into alignment to see the upgrade here. And so it's almost like a permission slip to find alignment in those moments so that you can move quickly into the upgrade, because all discomfort is just uninterpreted energy that is ready to transmute itself back into creative potential and open up new awareness and understanding. This is why we call it consciousness expansion. You're literally perceiving more data after you felt through the uncomfortable energy packet.
It's, yeah, as the universe expands, right? It moves 1% better in every direction almost. And I love how you spoke about well, you introduced the term miracle. You know, there was something, I must have heard it from somewhere. It's too wise for it to be my own language, but that it only takes 10 years to become an overnight success. And I really like that. You know, it is very true. And there are some, I guess, some observations of success that seem to land in people's laps, like winning the lotto. But then you see what the data says about winning the lotto, right? And how people end up worse off than perhaps they were before they won. And I wanted to
Right.
just
Well,
go
and
back to, oh,
in that example of overnight success takes 10 years. When people always talk about their struggles because that's what gets clicks, and that's what sells books, and that's how you get the Oprah interview. And so people are always going to reflect on their success from what they've overcome, because that's what the hustle harder community and pendulum wants to hear. They want to hear that, oh, if you're struggling right now, you could get out of it. And so they want you to focus on your struggles. But very often, if you've talked to enough successful people, those people, while they were engaging in challenges, of course, oftentimes they were having a really good experience in the challenge. Like they had a really balanced viewpoint on the fact that, of course, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be resistance. Bless you. There's going to be some level of resistance, just like when I go to the gym and I'm lifting weights. There's going to be some level of resistance, but there was a deep understanding that that was a necessary part of the growth, and the tension on the rubber band ends up launching you further across the room. And so, while yes, we want to celebrate every time we've overcome challenges, I think it's important to recognize that the way that we react and interact and respond to challenges is part of the time collapsing thing. And this is where we move more into God reliance, where a belief in God is really just holding space for the energy in a non-abrasive way. So if I'm self-reliant and something goes wrong or there's a challenge, the initial thing that I'm going to go to is anger, frustration, impatience. These are big feelings. This is energy packet, and that energy shows me that it hasn't been transmuted into pure potential yet. It's come into my field. There are new unknowns here, but I need to feel through those unknowns and transmute it into something that is translatable to me, that I can actually put into action. And so when I say, God, show me the way, show me how to show up here, really what I'm doing is I'm building a container. God is a container for that energy to then balance itself out. And if you believe that God is a real entity the way that I do, you believe that God can help you process that energy. And so that you're more efficient at working through that energy packet in concert with God than you would be trying to do it on your own. And so always when a big feeling comes in for me, I go into a prayer state, and a prayer state is setting an energy container. And what is the energy container for me? God, help me process this and interpret it through your eyes. And when you do this, a really interesting thing happens. You get a deep interpretation. You're able to move through that energy more effectively, and you're able to more efficiently move through time, because time is analogous to discomfort, right? Like when you have your hand on a stove, 3 seconds feels like 3 hours, because the discomfort is elongating time. But if you're having the time of your life, that's why we say, we have the phrase "time flies," because when you're having the time of your life, you're actually truncating time, and so time is perceptual based on how much discomfort is in your field. And so, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's building something, as a creator, as an artist, if you're looking to call in an end outcome, and you want that end outcome sooner than later, then the most beneficial thing that you can do is create a container for that discomfort to transmute itself, and to call in someone who I call God, something, some entity, some emotional relationship, to come in and optimally process that energy back into something where I'm at cause over time once again.
I love so much how you articulated that, regardless of whether or not you believe in God or have an understanding of a relationship or a higher being with the universe, even really practically, to be able to set an intention that you want to see an answer or a perspective, or approach a scenario from a different way, to create that space is what one needs to do. The distance between that emotion and action creates the opportunity to see another point of view, to receive another insight and idea, to be touched by God and oriented in a different way. And it is that space, regardless of there being a greater entity or not, that allows one to better orient themselves and move forward. And
Yeah.
again,
One
ask and you shall receive. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to inject that just came to me, because that's all correct. And for me, I believe that our relationship with God, with this higher, more optimal ideal, is an emotional relationship. God doesn't come to us in a voice. God doesn't necessarily come to us auditorily. That's all our interpretation of an emotional energy relationship that we have with God. So when God comes to you, it's emotionally overwhelming. It's tearful. It's like full of love. It is a sense of gratitude and appreciation that is too big. Like almost like when you feel like a fear that's too big, like you can be overwhelmed with God's love, and that's a really interesting experience that has to be processed just the same. And in many ways, if you don't want to fully believe that God is relational, that it's a personality, that's it, that there's an emotional flavor to God that you can have a true emotionality or emotional relationship with, then maybe the technological bridge to help you to start experiment with how beneficial being in concert and God reliance can be to think about God reliance as using the internet, or using something like Chat GPT, where self reliance is just using the information on your hard drive. And so, up until 94, everybody was just, had to put a CD-ROM in, and they only had access to the information that was there. And they couldn't really do anything meaningful with that information other than regurgitate it and then sometimes draw new connections. Where with the internet, you got access to everything, right? Or to an expanding everythingness of information. Well, what is God? It's an expanding everythingness. And so then AI and machine learning units come in, and now they allow you to interpret that everythingness in interesting ways by querying it. And so, in many ways, our relationship with God is an emotional query into everythingness to bring in data locally into our field that serves us in that moment. And so, by opening ourselves up to a spiritual internet connection with God, we're no longer reliant on performing all the calculations of our life, which is what self-reliance is. Instead, and so there's a lot of slog and resistance and lag that happens when we're self-reliant, because we're forcing ourselves to do something even if the energy isn't there. Where in God reliance, we're only taking inspired action that God puts on our heart. And if we know that we need to work out, or we know we need to get some work done, we create the container by going into prayer with God and say, this is something that feels important. It feels like something I need to get done, and I have no desire to do it, God. Can you put on my heart the way that I can get this done right now so that I can achieve the greatness that you have for me? That what I just said is a search engine query, and it is literally calling from everythingness a structuring of data that says, why don't you call this person? Here's a search term. Why don't you search this out? Did you ever think about doing it this way? And the idea will hit you when you create that container so powerfully that you will be laughing because it's so perfect. You're like, you're right. I didn't want to work out, but I do want to go canoeing. I keep using that because there was a period in my time where I did not want to work out, but I was willing to go down to the river and canoe every single day. And it ended up being, I ended up in better shape doing that than when I was slogging myself to the gym. And so there's always a way to do the thing that you know you should do in a way that is lifting. And what you're doing when you pray to God, and when you recognize through God reliance that everything is available to you. What is abundance? It's what I need to know when I need to know it. It's an effective search engine is abundance. If I have the exact data that I need in every moment, which is what a good search engine does, I'm abundant. I will have everything that I need. I will always make the most optimal choice. And so our relationship with God is just opening up the search engine of reality by setting a container to properly interpret what God is willing to put on our heart when we will listen for it.
Oh, I love that. And a reminder of that definition of abundance being what I need to know when I need to know it makes that it makes the understanding or the knowing that abundance is our birthright more palatable, because I think if I was to look at my life, even when I was the most nihilistic or the most self-reliant, the most white knuckly I've ever been in my life, I have still found out what I needed to know when I needed to know it, or I met the right person when I needed to meet them, or the right thing happened when it needed to happen. Even though I was slogging and working and white knuckling, it was exactly the path that I was on. And it makes me think of that Seneca quote. I love Stoic philosophy. I think it doesn't quite hit some things that I'm figuring out in my life right now, but Seneca has that great quote that we suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality. And I see that as white knuckling, right? It's like,
Right.
we are playing out all of these scenarios of what could go wrong, and then trying to intellectualize every right answer, and then we come up with 17 different things that we must do, and then we're looking at the list and we're like, oh shit, now I've got to slog through this list. And this is how we end up on that self-reliant hamster wheel, because it's all just I need, I'm lacking, I need to go. And as we develop, I guess, a relationship with ourselves, and this is why I think the journey to God reliance is very much through self-reliance, right? Is as we develop, I asked you about competency in our last chat. As I have developed competency with myself, I have developed faith in myself, and then that faith has extended to something greater. And now I can call the universe or the collective unconscious, from the Jungian perspective, God. My relationship with God, my definition of God has changed, and my faith, as I have faith in myself to grow and figure out the unknown and walk the path. Of course, I have to have faith in the external, the thing all around me, to mirror that faith in myself to walk the unknown path.
It is a journey, right? That's why we call it a journey. And so One of the things that I like to think about when it comes to God reliance is if I want to beat Goliath. So in the story of David and Goliath in the Bible, Goliath is this huge giant of a man. He's undefeated in all battle, and no warrior has ever been able to beat him. And he just slays full armies. And so there's a certain level of fear that people have towards them. And so if I was a self-reliant person, I would train to be a good fighter and learn how to use a sword. And once I was competent enough with my sword, then I would be like, maybe God will put on my heart the way to use my sword in order to slay David, all right, in order to slay Goliath. But David, who was fully God reliant and not self reliant, said, God will show me how to do it with a slingshot. God will show me how to do it with what I already have. And that's the difference between self-reliance and God-reliance. Is self-reliance requires a certain level of developing competency to get the thing that I want, where God-reliance says, I've already given you what you need, and you just need to see that the slingshot can hit him in the forehead.
Yeah, as we rely on self, we only are able to see through the very limited frame that we've been able to develop through our experience. And
Right. And
overarchingly,
smart people are victims to their own self-reliance. I don't know if you've ever met somebody who is like stupid, or you see them as aloof, and yet like they have all this money, like everything always happens for them. I used to go skiing with several people that I was like, these are some of the dumbest people I've ever met. How are they so goddamn successful? And it's because they were not hindered by the fact that they didn't know how to do it, because they didn't know that they didn't know how to do it. And so because of that, they just did it, and things always worked out for them. They always ended up finding an operator who would just fill in the gaps and do the things that they needed to do. And so there's this idea that I have to be good at everything before I can delegate it to someone else. And that is, as someone who lives in self-reliance, you in God reliance, God will show you who your right hand man is. God will show you the people that are ready to be in service to you, and therefore in service to God via you. And there's great value in being a visionary that is unencumbered by process. I've worked with many visionaries, and they are dog shit for knowing what the process should be, but they're brilliant at seeing the big picture and just being like, figure it out. And so, yes, there has to be people that are thinking about the process, but it doesn't necessarily have to be you, unless you're just totally lit up by being a part of that. If you want to be a part of that process, then God's going to show you where to be a part of that process. And part of developing competency is that God will put you in certain processes. You will work under other visionaries. You will have mentors, and you'll be a part of the process until you're willing to wholly step into the state of being a visionary, at which point processes just develop underneath you.
yeah, I love how you use that as an example, because as I get clearer at seeing what I see, and casting a vision, not just to outwardly to the people that I work with, but just internally and develop a relationship with it, I continually call in the things that I need, or the details or the processes that need to happen, because I am not process oriented. I do not cross the I's and dot the T's, as some would say. That is just not my jam. But as I just develop that relationship, that alignment with something greater, with the root of service to myself, my family, the people that it actually serves, and the world, it just every single time the right person shows up, the right solution comes up, the right inspired action shows up. Before we developed our relationship as strongly as we have, John, on one of my words for this year after white knuckling my first year in business last year was inspired action. And it's just funny how things just sort of come back around. And as I've developed a more conscious relationship with God, inspired action just makes more and more sense every single day. I have this whole system of action that I use in like an Evernote system, which is still great. It orients action. But all of last year and the years before that, I used to white knuckle organizing it, what needs to go next, yada, 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 self-reliance, around self-reliance, now I'm so often seeing these things just be ticked off. Like, oh, I didn't even do that, but this person in my business did that. Oh, I don't need to do that anymore because this happened. Oh, all of these things come together, and that's gone. It is just that developing relationship with the universe, the entropy reduction system, the network of people around me. And I just really wanted to go back. I backpacked in the US for a few months when I was 21, and I met this guy, Henry. I don't know if he'll ever listen to this, but Henry is just, he's from Yorkshire, England. He is just a happy-go-lucky, charismatic, confident man, and he comes to the States. We worked in a summer camp together for 2 months. I think he came with about $800 US, which was just, we were going to go backpacking for 6 weeks after this camping trip. And we get towards the end of the camping trip, and he's got like $100 left. He's like, oh, it's fine. I'll figure it out. You know, I just did his unwavering confidence. I had like all of this nest egg saved, and I had budgeted every single week because I was scared of running out of money overseas. It was my first overseas trip, and he's like, no, we'll figure it out. It's fine. And on the second last week of the summer camp, there was a fire in the laundry, and so many of us lost a lot of our clothes. And so essentially the insurance company came to the summer camp and basically told us to write a blank check for the amount of clothes that we lost. And so suddenly Henry's like, I needed new clothes anyway. This is perfect. Writes down the amount that he lost plus a little bit of zhuzh. And that was enough money for him to re-kit himself backpacking and have more than enough money for the 6 weeks that we traveled together. And just, oh man, I just couldn't help but think of it.
Dude, I forget the guy's name, but there's an online philosopher that I found on Twitter. Really interesting guy, but he has a premise that he calls loafing, and loafing is just kind of going with the flow and not needing to structure things too much and allowing life to give you what it's ready to give you, and you to be on an exploration that if life isn't giving you, a ton of material possessions, that's because the thing that you're exploring in your life doesn't require that. And just being at peace with whatever life is giving you. And that's, in many ways that is like akin to Eastern philosophy of just kind of being in a state of desirelessness. Now, I actually don't subscribe to that. I think that desires are healthy. I think that God speaks to us through our desires, our pure desires. Oftentimes, our desires are trying to cover up fear. They're trying to cover up discomfort. We want something because without it, we would be uncomfortable. But our pure desires are things that we want just for the experience, just to have them, just to showcase that we're capable of creating anything. And so I do believe that God puts desire on our heart in interesting ways to showcase how big God is and how powerful God is and how anomalous God's processes can be. And it's why I've always said to anybody that I work with, you have to recognize that statistically, you don't have to be the center of the bell curve. You can be the anomalies on either end. Somebody has to, and if you put your attention there, it will be you. And so I've always said I'm the anomaly. I've always said I'm the luckiest person I know. I've always said I'm the type of person that just wins everything. It's a chicken or egg scenario, right? Like I don't remember if I started saying that before I started winning everything or if I started winning everything and then that's what I started to say. But you can start to prove some of these things out by just having interesting self-talk. And one of the best use cases of prayer is to be able to have self-talk that you can actually believe in, because you may not believe that you're a lucky person, but you can believe that God is lucky and that God bestows that type of miracle on people. And so you might set the container for you to have luck where you wouldn't be able to believe the affirmation, I am a lucky person and I win everything. That might create a lot of resistance in you because you don't believe it. But you could set a container that says, God, I know that you bestow miracles on people, and I know that I'm developing my relationship with you in such a way that that gift is available. So put on my heart where I need to be and how I need to show up in service to you to be able to experience your miracles. You can believe that. That's why people go to prayer, because to be able to believe the affirmation actually requires a certain level of self-reliance. Like you have to do a little bit of emotional work. If you're not in concert on that work, that emotional work can take a while. And so prayer and the going to God, going to the everythingness via the search engine of prayer is an interesting way to collapse the things that prevent you from doing what you should be doing, from having what you should be having. Because even if you can't believe that you're worthy of something, you can believe that through God you are.
Yeah, and this, I guess, why I alluded to the journey or the road being through self-reliance was, of course, because I'm reflecting on my own path, right? And I'm just thinking about myself in the times that I was most lost or most defeated or seeking answers that I'm sure it would have been very hard for me to hear or to listen to or to accept that. Well, all I have to do is understand that God's worthy and He bestows that on me, and therefore I'm worthy. Because that was what I was perpetuating. It was like I am not worthy. I am not giving the acceptable sacrifices worthy enough to achieve the things that I am lacking, and that perpetuating cycle of thought kept creating inaction and kept stopping me from levitating out of the hole, as some smart intellectual wise wizard has once said to me. But I dug out, I clawed up every step of the way, and it wasn't until I did reach a stage of confidence that I could start seeing the patterns, seeing the externalities, meeting another wizard that I know that helps me understand the world through simulation and entropy reduction, and all of these things are just a fantastic metaphor and alternate way to understand our relationship with natural law and God and the universe and how we fit in. And linking that back to desirelessness, right? I'm sure the path of the Buddha, enlightenment, desirelessness, a state of peace and complete detachment from the desire and the pull, the craving of the world is very much what it's selling you. But what is missing in that path, from my perspective, is service, is contribution, is your how you fit into this collective unit of things that all move and weave and orient themselves together. And as you become God reliant, you become a better servant, you become a better node in that network to create I guess a better future in whatever way you are destined to. And that's how I kind of see that difference as well, is that God is calling me to play my bit, to be my
Yeah.
node, to grow as
Yeah.
the network grows.
Right. And the node is an apt metaphor, because a node might be externally of service in a certain way, but it might be the monk in the cave that meditates for 40 years and never interacts with anyone, and just becomes a pure processor of energy. In any network there are certain mechanisms within a server farm where you have applications that are actually doing things, and then you have some units and machines that are simply there to just process energy. They're an energy arbitrage system, and you'll be called into service in the way that you're called. But we have to be very careful about projecting onto people what their service is, because their service might be just to be an efficient processor of energy, and because of that they are able to help balance the energies of the planet in such a way where people aren't absolutely fucking chaotic, because the new energy coming into the planet gets balanced through the old energy via each of us who is a node in the machine. So some people are going to be called to physical service in some way, and other people are going to be called just to be in alignment. And being in alignment is being of service. That is being an optimal node in the network. And so a lot of times in Western society, especially, service work can become weaponized, where especially if you have a woke political take, it can be like, oh, I'm going to judge your morality based on your external actions and based on how you show up physically, and the service work that you do physically, where somebody who is maybe more oriented from an esoteric or spiritual perspective recognizes that actions and intentions can be different. And if I'm doing something just to get a moral badge, that's not a pure node. That's not pure node action. That's not pure processing of energy. It's not. It's actually building karma rather than reducing karma. And so we have to, part of being in God reliance is that God knows how to optimally use us as a node, and we will be given the desire to do the thing that allows us to be of utmost service. And just because somebody else is ladling soup at the soup kitchen and we don't feel called to do that, we shouldn't feel guilty that we don't have a desire to do it, because that's not our work. Because if we were in pure emotional alignment, we would either feel desirous to do that work, or we would go where we are called. And going where you're called rather than going what you're being shamed into doing is incredibly important, and part of the distinction between self-reliance, which is building a moral badge, and God-reliance, which is becoming an optimal node in the network.
Yeah, beautifully put. I see that relationship with our identity being based on what we perceive others perceive of us versus the identity based on what we perceive of us, right? And of course, we're going to operate from guilt, shame, envy, jealousy, all of these sort of negative emotions if we're constantly looking outward for meaning, our place in the world, how we're supposed to operate, how we're supposed to think, what things are supposed to be like.
That's right. And every time we do something that we don't want to do, we're in self-reliance, not God-reliance.
Oh, that's interesting. That is really interesting. Oh, because then I loved the loafing term, right? And again, like, it'd be really easy to turn your nose and be like, oh yeah, well you're not contributing, you're just loafing around, you're just taking advantage of anyone willing to help you out, you're not taking any of this seriously. And then I also hear, like, you're saying, anytime you do something you don't want to do, you're in self-reliance. Well, what about the bloke or the young lass that sits on their computer 24 hours a day playing video games, smoking weed, doing drugs? Well, again, I don't know, like, is that necessarily this is I'm trying to manifest or speak through my dad, right? Like, if you were to say to my dad, Dad, you just have to do everything that you want to do at all times and never do anything that you don't want to do. I can only imagine what he would say back to that. It's like,
yeah.
Are you kidding? Get back to work. Stop being a piece of shit.
Well, the interesting thing is that it's a straw man argument, because you could say, oh yeah, if I want to play video games all day long, I should do that. And yeah, if you played video games all day long for forever, that would probably be detrimental. But you also won't have that desire for forever. And so if you are highly desirous of playing video games in this moment, it's a fallacy to extrapolate that over all time, because you're not going to have the desire 6 months from now. You will be in a different emotional state, and it will be either better or worse, but your decision space is going to change based on that experience. And so, who's to say that particular game isn't wiring your nervous system in such a way where you understand how to solve certain problems, where at some point in the future, because you played that game, you're able to, as a consultant or whatever you end up doing in the military or whatever, you have a unique relationship with your nervous system and an ability to think quickly and solve problems quickly in high emotion moments, which is what video games teach us. And that actually is optimally suited for the way that you're ultimately designed to be of service. So if your ultimate desire is purely, I feel called to play this video game right now, no, I have no other desires. If that's the desire, then that is the thing that you should explore. But the thing that happens when you truly allow yourself to do that without any guilt, because a lot of people will play the video game, but they'll do it with guilt. And so now they don't have clear perception, and now they're all out of whack. And so they didn't do it purely, and so it isn't serving them. But if you can make that choice without guilt, you're making it in alignment, and then whatever is supposed to happen next is going to happen next. You're going to see an ad at the end of the in-game ad point that's like, oh, actually, that's what I should do. That gave me a great business idea. Like there's a level of causality that happens at the metaphysical level that is more deeply and has its tentacles out in more interesting ways than physical connections. And so it's irresponsible to say that playing a video game isn't going to make you a better preacher down the line. We don't know. We don't know if that's your path or not, but we do know that when you do things from an inspired place, when you do things and are in alignment, when you feel through your guilt and shame, when you're not shamed into doing things, but you're allowed to evolve on your own, you will ultimately end up in a more optimal space faster than if you'd done it the way somebody else forced you to do it and did it reluctantly.
I've just been smiling nonstop for those who can't see me on the screen for 6 minutes because I'm so happy. Just makes me so happy that I brought up that perspective, and because it was rooted in a lot of assumptions, right? It was rooted in a lot of assumptions. It's one in particular being that it was a fixed modality and that the desires and the motivations wouldn't change, and also the assumption that there isn't negative emotion underneath it, perhaps that is in misalignment, or that you could be completely aligned to playing that video game. And yeah, like I think I bring it up, and because I've spent too much of my past life avoiding the call, avoiding responsibility, avoiding the feelings that I didn't want to feel, smoke and weed, playing video games. But at times there has been an absolute.
Let's unpack that. So there's a big difference between being inspired to play a video game and doing it because you're bored or trying to escape from something that you know you should do. If you're escaping from something you know you should do, you already have the knowing on your heart, and you're avoiding you actually, we all want to do the thing that we know we should do. It's just uncomfortable to do it, and so we're not allowing ourselves to have the desire. What's the desire? I want to do the things I know I should do. That's the desire. That's the pure desire. But then we say, ooh, but it's uncomfortable. And then if we're unwilling to create a container to feel through that discomfort, we will then try to hide from that discomfort by smoking weed and playing video games. So did you choose the video game from a state of alignment? No, you didn't. And because of that, it doesn't serve you, because any choice that you choose out of alignment doesn't choose you. But if you could choose the video game in alignment, I just had a thread that came to me to explain this. So my brother loved shooter games when we were growing up, and my parents had the same critique. You're always playing these shooter games. But to their credit, they negotiated with him where he was allowed to play like 2 hours a day or something, and so he's still with it, but it was a pure desire. He wasn't trying to hide from something. My brother just was deeply interested in video games as an artistic form, and it got him really interested in Navy SEALs because he's playing all these shooter games. So then he starts going to the public library and getting all of these books on Navy SEALs. So then he enrolls himself in a Navy SEAL workout program. He's like 14, and he gets into like even better shape than me. I'm like jealous of my younger brother, and he's like so freaking jacked at 14 because video games led to libraries about Navy SEALs, which led to this workout program, which led to him watching movies like Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, Apocalypse Now, which then led my brother to having such a deep affinity with filmmaking that he started recreating war films in our backyard with my parents' handheld camera. One of those war films then won the Miami Film Festival, and my brother became one of the most sought after filmmakers in Texas because of that. All because early on he had this desire to play video games that ultimately led to this other thing. thing. And so it would be impossible to say that playing video games is going to lead to that. But because my parents, to their credit, have always let us explore our desires to the infinite degree. Like they, when we said we didn't want to go to college, they were on board with it initially, or eventually. There was a
Straight
while where I
away.
was lying
Yes,
lying
John.
to them about it, and we had to work out some of that. But eventually, they let us explore the path that we wanted to explore once we got clear on what our intentions and desires were. And because of that, we always had this very interesting path that seemingly unconnected things put us right where we needed to be. And that's how alignment works. And that's what God-Reliance is. Self-reliance would be, well, if you want to be a Navy SEAL, which my brother thought that he was gonna be, you're gonna have to join the military. And then, you know, a stern parent, when my brother turned 18 and decided he didn't want to join the military anymore, would be like, well, you need to stick to your word. You need to be somebody who sticks to your guns. And then they would have made him become a Navy SEAL when that was no longer what his desire was pointing him towards. The experience of exploring all of that Navy SEAL stuff was so that he could understand the beauty of storytelling a tragic moment. My brother is so good at interpreting tragic moments using cinematography, and he learned that from throwing flour bags in the backyard and blowing up his friends on camera.
Oh, mate, I love that these yarns that we get to have just go in so many beautiful directions. What a bloody story! How have we not heard about your brother's story before? I'm glad that me feeling some shame about spending some of my 20s smoking weed and playing video games allowed you the opportunity to share a remarkable story of why your brother surpasses you in every single way, John.
He wishes.
Oh man. Can we one last thing, and then because I think that was a really beautiful way to continue to explore the I guess the polarity between self-reliance and God-reliance. But I would love to just come back to one of the things that you mentioned that is I guess analogous to Christian religion, which is that the meek will inherit the earth. So I've heard that sort of as an off comment maybe a couple of times in my life. I haven't thought too much into it, and for some reason I'm being called to bring it back up and to ask you a little bit more about what the meek inheriting the earth looks like, feels like, why it came out to you when we were speaking about abundance being our birthright and a few of these other things.
Well, I think a lot of people interpret meek to mean poor, that the poor are going to inherit the earth, and that God values the poor, and you know that you should give up all of your belongings. But meek in the Bible actually means gentle. It actually it's like akin to balanced, and so what it actually means is those who are carefree and aligned and in alignment, and not self-reliant, not worried about it, because they recognize that God is going to take care of them. And so the meek are the God-reliant. They're the ones that don't have a care in the world because they know that God is taking care of them, and so there's a gentleness of spirit to them. And that's why in the Bible Jesus says for us to be like children, because children are most in a state of just relying on things to work out because they don't have any competency. And guess what? They almost always get taken care of unless they've taken on so many negative emotions of the world around them, because children are sponges. Some children don't have that, and that's tragic. And you know, in another video we can extrapolate those scenarios of why somebody gets into that, and why how that stems from the concept of original sin, and how that is actually man's making and not God's making. But let's table that for a second and just say that children, for the most part, are taken care of because they are expectant that they'll be taken care of. And it's only when their own resistance gets in the way that things really start to feel as if they're not being handed to them anymore. They take on the emotions of the world around them. They take on the poverty mindset of the people around them. They get out of that state of abundance, which is a belief that they're going to know what they need to know when they need to know. And then in the late 80s and 90s, there was this group of children that psychics started to call the indigo children. And these were children that in their aura had this kind of blue tint around their aura. And these are people like myself who were super hard-headed as children and unwilling to let authority figures talk them out of their sovereignty. And so these children came in to basically right the frequency that was being stripped of people through the world teaching self-reliance and the world saying that you're the result of your circumstances, which isn't true. And so the indigos came in with this belief system that was unshaking, no matter what circumstances they were in, no matter how poor they grew up. They were like, I'm a fucking wizard. And they exuded this into the world, and they held the space for this, and they proved this out. And now they're the people that are having these type of conversations all over the internet, and they become the teachers because they came in with an energy that could not be suppressed. And because of that, they never lost their connection to God-Reliance.
I was sort of observing my my internalization of that story, and I guess my inkling or my inhibition to be self-reliant, even in thought, right? Because I love hearing I guess different perspectives, especially from places that I haven't heard before. And I guess part of how I see my job in these chats is to create some grounding, to glean practicality, to get further things that might be a really bit broad, further unpacked by you. But just watching my awareness or my self-reliant thought go, well, how does that make sense logically? Like, how can I make sense of that logically? And there are ways that I can, of course, that high energy can be followed. A follower follows a leader that has a vision of the future, and high energy allows one to subscribe to that pendulum of energy, right? Like, logically you can make sense of a lot of these things, which is really great, but I just find it funny, like, why do I need to rely on myself to make sense of it practicality when I observe it everywhere as my eyes are open to it,
Almost always the reason is that I don't want other people to think I'm stupid. And
true.
This is almost always the reason that we skew towards self-reliance, because we don't want to be the guy at the ski trip that everybody's like, this guy's an idiot. How did he get all of this? We want people to think we earned it. And so what do we create? Scenarios where we have to earn it.
That is so interesting. A wealthy, happy idiot. That sounds very attractive, And
the thing is that if you're truly, there's a difference between an aloofness, which is a type of unconscious alignment, right? So in alignment of any kind, you're going to end up just receiving the gifts that are naturally yours. There is a kind of conscious alignment that shows up as wisdom. And that's ultimately what those of us who think that self-reliance brings us to a path of wisdom. Self-reliance brings us to a place of intellectual acuity. It allows us to become better calculators. Wisdom is an emotional talent. It is something that's learned somatically, and God-reliance is what allows us to become people of wisdom. Because what is somebody of wisdom? It's somebody who knows when to act, when to hold space. They say very little. They let reality fill in the details. It's that parable where the farmer is saying, maybe so, maybe not. Maybe so, maybe not. They're allowing reality to render itself without having to have control over it. And this is always what you see with the sage, with the Buddha, with the Christ figure, with the wizard. They're always this kind of aloof character that nobody knows, but what do they have? intense wisdom, an ability to know when to hold space, when to speak something into the room, and when to be absolutely quiet.
And when to knock someone on the head like the baboon does in The Lion King.
That's right.
I love it. I just wrote down intellectual acuity and wisdom, and then the equal sign with a cross through it. I thought that was brilliant. John, mate, as always, these just keep getting better and better. How bloody good! What a great way to start my weekend. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Again, everyone else listening, any questions, any thoughts, any ways that we can continue to orient the conversation, would really appreciate it. I did see a comment recently that someone said, "Whatever helps us sleep at night," and that's exactly the point. I want to sleep well at night, my friend. So appreciate it.
Right.
Appreciate your support and engagement.
Right. And just to comment on the energy of that, like cynicism is self-reliance to a T. And so of course you can get somewhere in self-reliance, but it's such a slog. And experimenting with God reliance is so freeing and light and fun and lifting. And it's just so nice to have things given to you for reality to literally render in such a way that you always feel pleasantly surprised. And you can't get there through cynicism. So feel free to leave those comments, but I'm praying and holding space that God will put something on your heart that unlocks you in such a vivid way that you go, those goddamn wizards were right. All right. See y'all later. Bye.